Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Stitch Sessions and another segment of Crochet Quick Chat. And this is a little segment where I answer some of the most common crochet questions. So I also teach crochet class in real life as well as here on YouTube. So a lot of times I get some common questions that I thought maybe you guys might have as well. So I thought I would take this time to address some of those questions. And actually, I want to start off by giving a shout out to one of you YouTube friends who reached out to me and asked me a specific question related to crochet. So here it is. It is from Creations by a Yankee, Christina Anderson. So I wanted to say hi, thank you for commenting. And your question was, I was wondering, is there a way to take a knit pattern and make it into a crochet pattern? And if so, could you do a tutorial for one? So here we are, Christina, I'm answering your question. And I really like this question because I am a hardcore to the bone crocheter. It is my first and true love in the fiber arts, but I have started knitting as well. And so many times I've come across beautiful knit patterns and I thought, how on earth could I take that and, or is it possible that I can transform it into a crochet pattern? And the answer is yes. So the cool thing about understanding crochet or knitting or sewing for that matter, or building, is being able to understand how to look at something with a critical mind, in the sense of how to solve the problem of how can I recreate that thing. So with knit projects, for example, there's three main things that you want to bring to mind when you're looking at trying to maybe transpose that into a crochet project. So the first thing you want to look at is, what is the shape I'm looking at? Shapes, triangles, rectangles, squares, octagons, hexagons. Everything has a shape to it. Secondly, what is the structure of that item? So meaning, how is it put together? Is it done in several panels? Is it done in the round? Is it a circular shape that's sewn in? Is it just a big old square that's sewn together? So how is the structure put together will help you kind of break down the pieces that you need in order to then transform it into a crochet project. And thirdly is, what is the texture of the stitch I'm looking at? So most commonly associated with knit projects is that beautiful just plain knit stitch, which actually you want to stay tuned for the next video I have coming up. That's going to be a complement to this one. And I have a quick tutorial on how to crochet the knit stitch. So there is a way to crochet that will give you the same look as knit. It's also known as the waistcoat stitch. So that's coming up shortly. So you want to look at the texture of the stitch. So is it just a basic knit? Is there cabling to it, where you've got some twists and what gives it that braided look? There is a crochet version of being able to do that. Are there eyelets or little spaces in there? There is a way to do that in crochet as well. So those are the three main things you want to look at. You want to look at the shape of it, the structure of the project, and the texture of the stitch. So I have a couple of examples here today that I am going to use to kind of show you. So the first thing, I'm going to start really, really simple. So when we're talking about what is the shape of the project. So in this case here, I am just working on a super flat scarf, and it's just using basic knit and purl stitches, or also known as the stockinette knit. So you can see the shape right now, well, right now it's a square, but it's going to be just a rectangular shape. And I will put a clip of this, a little bit more of a close-up for you to look at it. And I also want to give a shout out to my dear friend Frances, who has been a guest here on the Stitch Sessions. She gifted me this gorgeous baby fine merino wool yarn, and it's just divine. So I've been knitting up a scarf with it. So again, I'll put up a close-up of the stitch so you can see it's just the basic knit. and it's just a basic square stitch. So if I were to redo this or replicate this in a crochet pattern, I would know that I would have to start with a basic chain row. Hopefully you can see that. And then I would just work back and forth, back and forth. If I wanted to use the knit stitch in crochet, then I would do that. Or you could do something like single crochet or slip stitches if you just wanted to kind of replicate as close to the texture as possible. And of course, how is it constructed? It's not really, it's just one piece. So the shape here is a square or rectangle. How it's constructed is just, it's one piece on its own, so it's really simple. And the texture is just a basic knit pattern. So in crochet, you might want to keep it simple with a single crochet or a slip stitch, or doing the actual knit stitch. Like if you really wanted to replicate this, you would use the knit stitch. You know, I've taken things where I've just, you know, used a double crochet or a half double crochet. Like, don't be afraid to just take the idea, and then a lot of times when you're working through a pattern, it'll start to kind of take a life of its own. So just because it's knitted doesn't mean you always have to use the knit stitch. You can just use the basic core idea of the project. So moving on to another example of something I've knitted. I knitted this fantastic little case that I use for some of my dance items. I've got a shoe brush in here. Oh, got some hand cream in there. So I just decided to make this great little case, and I knitted this. So the first thing that you want to look at, and I'll put a little close up there because there is a little bit of an eyelet detail there, is what is the shape of this project? So if I look at it, it's a square. Okay, so it's just nice, simple, and easy. Now, how is it constructed? In reality, this was actually a rectangle. So I started here, and then I continued to build my work, and I created a rectangle. So what happened is I then folded that rectangle in half and sewed up my sides here. And then of course you can tell I added a little zipper in here that I hand sewed together. So the shape of this was actually a rectangle. And the structure was I made a rectangle, I folded it together, sewed up the sides, and added a zipper. And all of a sudden, this really what looks like a super complicated knit project was like, I can most likely do this in a crochet pattern. And again, you don't have to use the knit stitch. So I've done lots of bag projects with like single crochets or even double crochets, okay? The third thing you're going to look at is what's the stitch texture. So like I just said, this is using basic knit stitch, but I did add a sweet little detail here with these little openings. And so what I did was I actually used decreased stitches and then alternated to some increased stitches. And based on not the last Crochet Quick Chat we had, but I think 2 videos ago, I talked all about what is a decreased stitch and what is an increased stitch. So now if I didn't know anything about knitting, I would just look at this and go, okay, well, there's a couple little spaces here. So somehow I have to figure out how to do some eyelets or little chain spaces. So in crochet, I would use an idea of either using decreases with a chain 1 and then increases to create these little spaces here, okay? And for those of you that did the bridal gloves, I used an eyelet stitching for those gloves. So it created some spacing in there. So it's a very similar idea to this, okay? So that's example number 2. Now, example number 3 is where we start getting a little more ambitious. And that is when we take a larger project, like a sweater or a cardigan that I'm so excited. I just finished my first knit cardigan design and I'm super excited about it. And I used this fantastic new yarn by Loops and Threads, and I believe it's called the Rippling Wave, and this was the stripes. So they have the Rippling Wave yarn, and then they've got the Rippling Wave stripes. And I have to say, this is just divine. Yes, so I have it here. It is 50% acrylic and 50% polyester. I know I'm kind of digressing on the topic, but I just love this yarn so much. It was so wonderful to work with, and to knit or crochet, it's like butter in your hands. Anyway, so I made this cardigan and I knitted it. So you would look at it and go, okay, well, how do I transform this into crochet? So the first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to take a look at the basic shape of the cardigan. So in essence, a cardigan, if you think about it, is like a big old square. Okay, so if I just hold this up here, I've just been playing with the idea of whether or not I'm going to add a pocket. But if I hold this up, if I hold it up from the back and I do this with the sleeves here, it's just basically a big square, okay? So that is the general shape of this project. Now, how it's structured is I had a square that's attached to two rectangles, which is the front panels here, okay? So now you've got two shapes you're dealing with. You're dealing with a square for the back panel, or a rectangle, depending on how long you're making the project. And then I made the two side panels because it's a cardigan and I wanted it to open in the center. So you're dealing with two rectangles. So the idea is that the square will be sewn to the two rectangles along the top and down the seams. And then you're going to create your sleeves, what shape are they? They are essentially rectangles, right? Or, I mean, they're tubes, but that's a whole other story. I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible so that when you look at something, you'll be able to excitedly say, hey, I can make that, right? So it's just basically one square and 4 rectangles. So 2 rectangles for the front panel and 2 rectangles for the sleeves, right? So you make the sleeve, and if you made it in a rectangle, you would then seam up the bottom of the sleeve. You'd sew it onto the opening you made for your hole, and you've put together the same structure of the knit you can put together in crochet. Now let's talk about the texture of the stitch, right? So this, again, super simple. I just kept it with a basic knit pattern, so also known as stocking knit. So the knit stitch is all on one side, and on the back it looks like it's all what we call purl stitches, okay? So you can keep that super simple by using single crochets and doing a whole cardigan. And you can replicate the design idea. So again, if you look at the shape and the structure, you can replicate that exact idea using single crochet stitches, even if you wanted to do double crochets or half double crochets. The thing is, when you're transposing from knit to crochet, you just want to ask yourself, do you want it to look like an exact replica, or do you want to replicate the design, meaning kind of the general idea of the pattern? So if you're just want to kind of replicate the general idea, then you just make sure that you are adhering to what the basic shapes are that you need, how they're put together with the structure, and with the stitch texture, you can play with it. So if you wanted to really replicate it, then I would recommend you using the crocheted knit stitch, also known as the waistcoat stitch. If you're not that picky, then just do single crochets or double crochets. But that is simply how you would do it. Now, there's one other thing that I haven't touched on, but I am actually going to do a tutorial on this coming up in a few more videos. And this is relating to the texture of the stitch, which is also really common in knit projects, which is cabling. So anytime you see those beautiful sweaters that looks like it has that braided effect, that's a technique called cabling. And we also absolutely have the ability to do that in crochet. So I will do a separate tutorial on that. So if you wanted to create some of that, you can do that too in crochet. So super exciting. Anytime you see that knit pattern, don't be intimidated. You can absolutely do it in crochet. The other quick thing I want to talk about with the texture is sometimes you'll see things worked kind of like in crochet from the center out, or if there's some kind of like flowered effect or something that flares out. that can also be done using a crochet technique. So that's when you get a little bit deeper into trying to replicate that knit pattern. So when you're looking at the texture, you want to ask yourself, what's the general shaping? Like, does it look like a shell to me, like it would in crochet? Does it look like it is crossing over, like a cabling effect, or like the XO stitches? Are there spacing in between? Like, are there little gaps? Is it trying to create an eyelet effect? I can do that in crochet. Is it doing a star type effect or a flower effect, which we can also do in crochet? Most commonly, the flower of life stitch is one that you've seen kind of done in knit, and you can transpose to crochet. And I have a tutorial on that as well. I'll make sure to put it in the description box down below, the link for that. The star stitch in crochet is also another great one that can replicate a flower or a star type of shape from knit. So as you can see, there's lots of possibilities. And again, the long answer that I gave to the short question, Christine, is that yes, it's absolutely possible to transpose a knit pattern into a crochet project. And I hope that these examples and the three main pillars that you have to touch on will help you in diving into your very first knit to crochet project. Okay, if I have missed anything touching on any knit possibilities and how would you transform them into crochet, make sure to leave me that question in the comment box down below so that I can answer it. I just kind of tried to pick some of the major things that you would probably see and be interested in replicating. This bag, this little bag here, like a lot of times people ask about purses, they've seen purse designs. But again, once you start with what is the shape and the structure, the rest usually falls into place quite easily. And then you can get into deeper detail with the stitch texture. Okay, guys, so as usual, I always give quite an extended answer to a short and quick question. And Christine, thank you so much for asking that question, and I hope that helps you out. I look forward to checking out what you are going to transpose into crochet. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, do me a favor and just give me a thumbs up, give me a like, because during these Crochet Quick Chats, I want to make sure I'm on the right vein of topics to discuss with you guys. And please keep your questions coming. You can also, don't forget, find me on Instagram at The Stitch Sessions. And I'll just leave a little link for it above there. Okay, and there you have it, guys. Now, if you haven't subscribed to our channel and you like some of the stuff that we're doing here, make sure you do so. This helps you stay up to date every time I upload a new video, which is every Wednesday morning. And lately, since most of us are still under quarantine and staying home in self-isolation, I've also been adding a few extra videos throughout the week, most commonly these Crochet Quick Chats, to kind of give you a little bit more insight into how to work your projects and to stay a little bit more connected with you. So make sure that you do that and just click that little notification bell so you'll know every time that we upload a new video. In the meantime, all, I hope you are staying well, staying sane, staying creative, happy crocheting, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.